Temptation can happen at any point, any place, and any time in our lives. Well, if you're joining us and reading through this month's reading plan, today's reading is Luke 22, verse 39 through 46, and I encourage you to read that passage. Well, just before Jesus' arrest, trial, and crucifixion, the disciples went with him to the Garden of Gethsemane. As Jesus left them, he told them to pray that they not fall into temptation. And many have taken that to mean that they should pray that they not fall asleep. And that may be a good answer to the question, what temptation was Jesus talking about? But there may be another temptation which came down the road a little later and really was much bigger for them. Immediately after Jesus returned to them a second time, he was arrested. And after Jesus was carried off, the disciples fled and hid. Peter even denied Christ. They all disbelieved the women when they were told that Jesus was resurrected. Temptation may occur in the most innocent of places. You may be shopping and come across a magazine rack that has the latest copy of a magazine that just kind of screams sexual headlines, or a tabloid newspaper which has some kind of salacious headline. Just by looking at those, you can fall into temptation. You may or may not want to pick them up and read them, or just think about them. Watching TV can also be a source of temptation. Advertisements are becoming much more open and revealing. It's easy for somebody to see something that really is not an appropriate thing for their life. Finally, temptation is something that is common. Submission to that temptation does not have to be. 1 Corinthians 10:13 tells us that we will be tempted, but it also tells us that we do not have to submit to that temptation, but rather God will supply a way out. That way out may be turning our head, closing our eyes, or just focusing on Christ. The early church, and in the Eastern Church today, had a one-sentence prayer that might help during times of temptation. It's called the Jesus Prayer, and while it has some variations, the most common one is, Lord Jesus, Son of God, forgive me, I am a sinner. By simply repeating that prayer, three things might quickly happen. First, you're going to focus on Christ rather than on the temptation. Secondly, you are praying directly to Christ and in His name. And finally, you will recognize who you are and the help you'll need. Try it. It may just work.